Welcome to our channel. Today, we're going to summarize The Happiness Project by Gretchen Rubin. The Scarlet Letter, written by Nathaniel Hawthorne, is a classic novel set in 17th-century Puritan New England that tells the story of Hester Prynne, a woman who was publicly shamed for committing adultery and forced to wear a scarlet letter A on her clothing as a symbol of her sin. Through Hester's struggles and the reactions of the other characters in the story, Hawthorne explores themes of guilt, shame, redemption, and the consequences of societal pressure and hypocrisy. Chapter 1: The Prison Door. The story begins in the Puritan settlement of Boston, where Hester Prynne has been publicly humiliated and sentenced to wear a scarlet letter A on her chest for committing adultery. The chapter describes the physical and moral landscape of the town, including the prison door that serves as a symbol of punishment. Chapter 2: The Marketplace. The narrator describes the crowd that has gathered to witness Hester's public shaming. He introduces Hester's husband, who has been absent from the colony for 2 years, and the Reverend Arthur Dimmesdale, who seems to be suffering from some kind of inner turmoil. Chapter 3: The Recognition. Hester's husband, Roger Chillingworth, arrives in the colony and realizes that Hester has committed adultery. He takes up residence with a local physician and becomes known as a healer. Chapter 4: The Interview. Chillingworth confronts Hester in her prison cell and makes her swear not to reveal his true identity. He also learns the identity of Hester's lover but does not reveal it to her. Chapter 5: Hester at her needle. Hester is released from prison and begins to work as a seamstress. She tries to find a way to support herself and her daughter while dealing with the constant judgment and condemnation of the townspeople. Chapter 6: Pearl. The narrator describes Hester's daughter, Pearl, who is seen as a symbol of her mother's sin. Pearl is wild and unpredictable and seems to have an otherworldly quality. Chapter 7: The Governor's Hall. Hester and Pearl are summoned to the governor's mansion to deliver a pair of gloves. The governor and his counselors discuss whether to take Pearl away from Hester and place her in a more suitable environment. Chapter 8: The Elf Child and the Minister. Hester and Pearl watch a procession of people on their way to a church meeting. Pearl sees the reflection of the scarlet letter in a suit of armor and refuses to approach her mother until she has put it back on. Dimmesdale is in the procession, and he and Hester exchange a significant look. Chapter 9: The Leech. Chillingworth becomes a respected member of the community and is referred to as a leech for his healing abilities. The narrator describes his increasing obsession with finding out the identity of Hester's lover. Chapter 10: The Leech and His Patient. Chillingworth becomes Dimmesdale's physician and starts to become suspicious of his patient's true condition. Dimmesdale begins to feel increasingly guilty for his role in Hester's punishment. Chapter 11: The Interior of a Heart. Dimmesdale experiences a significant internal struggle and begins to physically and emotionally deteriorate. He takes on a greater role in the church and starts to preach more fervently. Chapter 12: The Minister's Vigil. Dimmesdale stands vigil on the scaffold where Hester was publicly shamed, and Hester and Pearl join him. He gives a powerful sermon, and Chillingworth sees his emotional breakdown as a sign of guilt. Chapter 13: Another View of Hester. The narrator describes the physical and emotional changes in Hester since she was publicly shamed. She begins to reject the Puritan ideals that have been imposed on her and seeks a more authentic way of living. Chapter 14. Hester and the Physician. Chillingworth confronts Hester and suggests that she reveal the identity of her lover. She refuses and instead asks him to leave her and her daughter alone. Chapter 15. Hester and Pearl. Hester and Pearl are walking in the forest when they encounter Chillingworth, who reveals to Hester that he has discovered the identity of her lover. Pearl is uncomfortable around him and tells her mother that she wants to go back to town to see Governor Bellingham. Chapter 16. A Forest Walk. Hester meets with Dimmesdale in the forest, and they discuss their future plans to leave Boston and start a new life together in Europe. As they talk, Pearl and the forest seem to come to life, with Pearl playing among the trees and the sunshine breaking through the leaves. Chapter 17. The pastor and his parishioner. Chillingworth becomes suspicious of Dimmesdale and begins to watch him closely. Meanwhile, the minister is growing more and more frail and tormented by guilt, leading him to give a powerful sermon on sin and repentance. Chapter 18. A Flood of Sunshine. Hester and Pearl are at the governor's mansion for a meeting, where they encounter Chillingworth and Dimmesdale. After the meeting, Dimmesdale and Hester walk through the streets and share a brief moment of tenderness before being interrupted by Pearl. Chapter 19. The Child at the Brookside. Pearl and Hester go to a brook to cool off on a hot day, and Pearl shows her mother a reflection of herself in the water, leading Hester to reflect on her past and present. Chapter 20. The minister in a maze. Dimmesdale has a vision of Hester and Pearl at midnight, and he decides to join them on the scaffold where Hester was once publicly shamed for her sin. While there, he confesses his guilt and dies in Hester's arms. Chapter 21. The New England Holiday. The townspeople gather for a holiday celebration, where Hester and Pearl are snubbed by the crowd. Hester receives a letter from the ship's captain who is supposed to take her and Dimmesdale to Europe, but she decides to stay in Boston. Chapter 22. The Procession. Hester and Pearl watch a procession of dignitaries pass by, and Pearl finally acknowledges her mother's scarlet letter, asking her to pin it back on her dress. Chapter 23. The Revelation of the Scarlet Letter. Hester removes her scarlet letter and lets down her hair, revealing herself as a beautiful woman. She and Dimmesdale had planned to run away together and start a new life, but with his death, she decides to stay in Boston. Chapter 24. Conclusion. Years later, Hester returns to Boston, where she lives alone and is revered by the townspeople for her charity work. She is buried next to Dimmesdale, with a scarlet letter A marking their shared grave. That concludes the summary of The Scarlet Letter by Nathaniel Hawthorne. Thanks for watching. To read the full version of the book, click on the link in the description below. Don't forget to subscribe to our channel for similar content.